rankings that we've got or recognitions, I think they simply come back to having great people, a great team, and also having the mindset that you're not only wanting to solve problems for clients that are ever evolving and do it better, but also giving back to the industry. I think in teaching people how to do that is one of the reasons that we're recognized. So I think it's the culture and the people and also, the value set that we have, which is the culture, but it's also giving back to the industry in terms of teaching mentorship.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of The Connected Advisor. I'm your host, Kyle Van Pelt, co-founder and CEO of Milemarker, and today I have the pleasure of being joined by Lori Van Dusen. Lori is the founder and CEO of LVW Advisors, which is an independent financial firm based out of Rochester, New York. Excited to talk to her about that. She is also the author of a book called Running with Grace, which is her story for her life through her Wall Street journey, along with her desire to be a Broadway star, which I actually am excited to talk to Lori about as well. But she has built an incredible career on Wall Street and an independent financial firm that is just like the firms you all love to learn and hear about. So Lori, thanks so much for being on the show.
Well, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Of course, the pleasure is all mine. I'd be remiss if I didn't start this off with asking what your favorite Broadway show is of all time.
Oh gosh. Well, I love a lot of them. I wish I was prepared for that because I don't think I can choose. It's going to sound really maybe cheesy, but The Sound of Music.
Not cheesy, it's classic.
I kind of grew up with that. I just always loved it. And it was a tradition, that you watched it around the holidays and stuff like that. But I have so many favorite shows. It's hard to pick.
Yeah, fair enough. It's like asking people what their favorite movie is, right?
Yeah.
Pick one movie.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Don't ask me that question.
I think I just found one of my questions for the end, one of our lightning round.
Oh, geez.
No, I'm just kidding. Well, yeah. So Lori, I start every one of these podcasts off with the same question. I already asked you one, but I have to ask everybody this question. And even just reading your bio a little bit about Running with Grace, I think this is going to be a good one. But my question is, what is your money moment? And the context behind that question is I found everybody's path to this space is different. Some people maybe have a traditional path. Maybe their parents did this or something like that. Most people I have found have an untraditional path because a lot of people don't know this is even a career or something you can do. But what I have found is that traditional or non-traditional path, everybody has a moment in their life that happened that kind of caused them to say, hey, this is what I want to go do. This is how I want to spend my time. This is what I want my career to be. So Lori, for you, what was your money moment?
Well, I didn't know it at the time. I was 7 years old. And I certainly had, like you mentioned, a circuitous path. I did not start out in finance. I have no formal degrees in finance. But when I was 7, my grandfather, who was my male role model, mentor, parent figure in every way, he was wonderful, was showing me annual reports at the kitchen table of companies that he didn't have a lot of money or anything, but he loved the stock market. So he'd show this little girl, annual reports and ask me what I thought. I was thinking about investing in this. What do you think? So if I go back in time, that was probably the moment, and he was such a great influence on me that ultimately I got to a Wall Street career. So ultimately.
That is awesome. I love it. I love the story about your grandpa sharing that with you because most people probably wouldn't share that with a 7-year-old or something along those lines. Was it way over your head in the beginning or did you?
Oh, yeah. For sure. But I think he was a really enlightened person. And I think he taught me the value as an adult of mentorship, mentoring young people and teaching them to color outside of the lines or see outside of their current circumstances. He exposed me to a lot of things, including Broadway, because he was in the restaurant supply business and there were big restaurant shows in New York back then. And he would just take me with him. And I was this little kid. He didn't think anything really of exposing a little girl to a lot of different experiences. And I think I must have been a pretty good kid. I didn't he just took me along with him as like his buddy. So I had a lot of different experiences, and I think he really taught me to just think outside of, I never thought, for example, that, oh, this is the 80s and I'm going to Lehman Brothers and that could be different. I didn't think anything of it. I just landed there, showed up and took the test and passed, and they kind of had to hire me. I worked in the World Trade Center and I got to the training program with a few hundred people, and there were two women, me and another person, but I still didn't think, oh, I don't belong here. Or I just think that that's the power of mentorship, whether it's a traditional kind of parent situation, mine wasn't, or it's a coach, or it's somebody, that you interact with as a young adult. I think it's super important. So
That's awesome. One thing I've found when doing research for this is that you went independent. You became an independent advisor or joined a firm that was an independent firm. I think it was roughly 5 minutes after the great financial crisis hit, give or take, maybe 8 minutes. I'm not sure. But
yeah, somewhere in that time frame.
I mean, what was it like going independent and making that huge change and huge difference in your career and the type of advice you're providing at such a historic moment in the markets?
Context and looking back provides a lot, but at the time, it was August 31st, 2008 that we left. It was Smith Barney at the time. It was right before the Morgan Stanley merger, and I was managing director, so that meant I was kind of at the top of the advisory stack. We had a $5.6 billion practice that I really grew from a desk and a phone, and that is the absolute truth. I didn't have partners. I had a lot of people that I mentored, and I was a young mom very early into my career. So anyway, I fought a lot of battles around conflicts of interest and things that I just thought were upside down for a long time. And I just felt we weren't resourced properly. There were a lot of reasons that I left at that time, but the primary reason was my boys, I have two sons, were a little bit older. So I felt I had adequate support. My husband was fantastic. I felt like I could do it. And so I wasn't really thinking about, oh, it's August 31st, 2008. And honestly, most people didn't know that we now call it the GFC or the Great Financial Crisis, but that in the fall of that year, so we're at August 31st, 2008, within a month, the banking system was pretty much insolvent. I don't think the average person knew that. I don't really know, but we were just navigating, and we brought over every single client. I mean, every single client transition. These were institutions, and that was what I was focused on. And then, a month later, it was a real wake-up call when you were getting calls from clients that were professional investors or perhaps involved with large financial firms that sat on boards saying, what do you think is happening? And it was pretty scary. And we just kind of kept forging through it all. But looking back on it, oh my gosh, I don't know. People will say a lot of times, wow, that was perfect timing. I'm like, yeah, no, it wasn't. It was not perfect timing.
I could only imagine. Yeah. I mean, whether you stayed or you went, the conversations that were probably happening during that time, I can only imagine how wild they are.
Yeah, you have clients in transition, and maybe that helped us. We had clients or maybe not, but clients in transition. You've got, the financial crisis going on. And I also realized pretty early on, as I write about in the book, within a month that I was being sued by the largest bank in the world. Citigroup sued me when I left and named a lot of my teammates who had followed me. So that was fun on top of the financial crisis. And then within a couple months, I realized that I probably didn't do proper due diligence on the firm I had joined. And so they were under a lot of duress. It was all really a tough period of time.
Yeah, that's incredible. It sounds like from your book and from that experience and everything, you've really just had a ton of resilience. You've been able to deal with adversity in a lot of meaningful ways, which I think is cool. But then you go on to start your own firm. And one of the things that stood out to me when I was reading about that, and I think everybody says this, but I'm curious, is, you started the firm because you wanted to do advice differently. You wanted to do it your own way. You had different thoughts on how advice should be delivered. And I'm curious to hear your take on what that means. Because, you worked at a huge, very successful firm. You built, like you said, a very, very large book of business with, a phone and a desk. And then you go to a different place, you see them doing it. And these experiences lead you to say, no, there's a different way to do this. There's a better way to do this. I'm going to go out on my own and I'm going to do it that way. And it's clearly worked. But I'd love to hear what it was that you saw that you wanted to do differently.
I had a choice to make at that point in time, and it was 2011 when I formed LVW Advisors. The easy choice was to go back to the future. The easy choice was to take a check and go to Merrill Lynch, or we'll go back to Morgan Stanley, because Smith Barney is now Morgan Stanley, or go wherever, right? There are 4 choices. There was money on the table, and I could have done that. And I just kept thinking, in the book, I write about the fact that we won the lawsuit, that the Citigroup lawsuit actually went to arbitration. And at the point in which Citigroup was denied, all the charges and fined for discovery failure, I felt like it was a divine sign that I should keep going and that I should try to really execute on what I thought was the vision for financial services and the delivery of advice. And I always say this, but, I didn't think I was any kind of visionary. I just knew that an objective platform that was really integrated around the kind of client that we had, solve problems, make their lives easy. And I'd seen from my previous experience in the firm that I joined, the RIA that I joined before forming my own company, that technology was really powerful, and that there were things that, in a wirehouse, things were so rigid, and it was architecture built on old architecture. So I knew that this was, kind of a really powerful thing to do. I just had to move forward. So I just think that was the moment where I was like, okay, we won this. I'm supposed to do this. I started to build a platform around clients.
Very cool. I love that. And it's been going well, it seems. So you've been at it since 2011. You've built a really nice business. You've got all kinds of accolades from, Barron's, from Institutional Investor. I think you were even named CEO of the Year at one point for all that you've done. Maybe it's a simple question, but what do you think is behind all of that? What do you think it takes to build a firm of that much success by doing it your way and doing it differently? There's a lot of people out there trying to build firms that maybe they haven't had the same level of success.
I think it's a lot of things. I think first, necessity is the mother of invention. So early on, I had 2 boys, and I had to really figure out how I could stay present with them and be in this business. And so I mentored people around me, and I also was probably pretty good at picking out my own material flaws, the things that I'm just terrible at, and finding people who excelled at them, sticking with the kind of client that we wanted to serve, and really asking them what they were struggling with. I say a little bit about this in the book, but our whole business is based on understanding the client's own unique situation, the problems they're having, the implications of those problems, and then solving for that. And so I feel like my whole career was always in this discovery mode. How do we do this better? How do we do this better? And clients' needs have evolved and changed, and things have been more complex. And now I don't necessarily think there's fee compression going on, but we're being asked to do more for the same fee. So I have always kind of been on this quest to make the clients' lives more simple, be their first call, put people around me that are better than I am at helping me solve the problem, and having it appear to the client like it's just one call. Like there's not 5 calls that have to make. So we have a sophisticated client base. We have a lot of professional investors that we manage money for. We also have some institutions, and then we have a lot of entrepreneurial business owner types of clients and a handful of athlete entertainer like clients. You have to really study each client base that you're serving and say, what is it that they really need that's not out there? It's not like you have to build everything internally, but you have to find people that you can marry up with or join or partner with, so it is seamless in solving the problem. And I have learned a lot of things that I've talked about in the book. My best lessons and my best, learning experiences have been through failure, and there have been a lot of real epic failures that I write about. But I think when you can put good people around you that are exceptional at things, that really helps. But I've also learned if you build it internally, you might have to unwind it because, something that you think, and I can give you examples, but something you think is a great, kind of offering for the client, maybe asymmetric for you as a business owner the wrong way. Too much risk, not enough. So you might be better just partnering outside of the firm with somebody who can help you do that, whether it's accounting, CPA services, bill pay, whatever it is. Because those things are really valuable and they're important. But if you don't build it really well, you can lose a client over something it's out of your control or you didn't really understand it. So you have to really think about who those partners are and make sure that you have to decide whether they're in the firm or outside of the firm. And, we've had some good success with that, I would say, and that has helped. And I think the kind of rankings that we've got or recognitions, I think they simply come back to having great people, a great team, and also having the mindset that you're not only wanting to solve problems for clients that are ever evolving and do it better than maybe you did it yesterday, but also giving back to the industry. I think in teaching people how to do that is one of the reasons that we're recognized. So I think it's the culture and the people and also, the value set that we have, which is the culture, but it's also giving back to the industry in terms of teaching mentorship.
Well said. One of the things you said there that kind of caught my ear was about how sometimes you might go do things and you might push things forward only to have to unwind it. And I actually think that's insightful because I think it's Jeff Bezos who's famous for talking about the concept of like a type 1 or a type 2 decision, and one of those is like you can't reverse it. So take your time, make sure that you are really good about being methodical, doing your due diligence because you can't go back. But then, the other one is, hey, you can change it. And I think he said something too, like 98 or 99% of decisions are the one that you can reverse and you can change. Because so many people operate their business and live their life as if decisions are irreversible or that it's going to be so painful to unwind something and take it back. But it seems like you weren't afraid to do that. So where does that come from?
Oh, gosh, I don't know. I think it's I write a little bit about this, I think, in the book too, but I've always had this personality or this kind of person that if I'm afraid of something or I think I can't do it, I go right for it. And I, want to unpack it and understand it. So an example would be after I had my first son, which was a really difficult labor and delivery. I was always an athlete. My husband and I used to bike, race, and do all kinds of things. But after that, I was like, you know what? I want to start running. I never thought I was a good runner. I didn't think I could do it. And I started out training for a marathon. And in 9 months, I ran a marathon. So I kind of always think it's like, the concept in sports of playing up or learning from people that are better than you are at certain things. And just, it gives you self-confidence to go do the next thing. So I don't know if that really answers the question, but I think it's just a basic part of my, walk in life. If I could share with people that resiliency comes from a sense of purpose and self-confidence, which comes from just, taking one step and then the next step and, just going for it when, you feel, just doing it. So I don't know if that makes sense, but that kind of seems like it's my history.
No, it's great.
This podcast is brought to you by Turncast. We make game-changing content for fintech and financial services companies. Learn more at turncast.com.
So let's get into the book a little bit because you mentioned becoming a runner. The title of the book is Running with Grace. I have some friends who've written books. I've heard it's not the easiest process in the world, but talk to us first. Before we get into the book and its content, and I know you've mentioned some things from it, but about the process of writing a book. Was it as grueling as everybody talks about, or was it not so bad?
Well, I had this concept for a really long time of writing a book only because I thought, well, I have some teachable moments and stories that maybe people could learn from that are, younger or in any kind of career track or going through change. But I never did it. I just always kind of talked about doing it. Then I do talk about in the book, the opening chapter is the day my husband died, and he died out of nowhere. Like he was a healthy, relatively young person. And when you talk to someone at 11 o'clock and they're literally gone at 1 and the same day, it changes your life. And so I talk a lot about this in the book about, kind of my experience. I'd always been this kind of resilient person, never had gone to any kind of therapy or anything like that. But I didn't have the tools to navigate this. And so a therapist that I talked to that was a trauma specialist, she said, you should really just start journaling. I just started journaling when I came into some kind of right mind, and I would just journal, and then I'd be out on a run and I'd think of something and I'd have my voice, voice memo on my phone. And just like, speak it into my notes. And then I would, wake up in the middle of the night and I had a journal next to me and I'd write stuff. And I don't know, maybe it is being a musician or growing up with that kind of aptitude where you kind of see patterns and think differently. I just one day looked at all of these, these journals, and I started to think, this is a book, I think. At that point, I was pretty far into feeling like you never are completely done grieving, but I had moved through a lot of stuff. And I asked my younger son, who's a music producer, to edit the book with me or to kind of read some of it. And he said, Mom, this is really good. And I think you could help a lot of people or teach a lot of people some things. And then I gave the book to a handful of other people. It was really 3 years, almost to the day that Ron died, that I made this decision to publish it. So it would have been roughly a year ago. And then I hired a professional editor, a content editor, and a legal team, all the things that you have to do to really publish a book. But I gave it to 5 people to read, and like beta readers, and they were distinctly different people. They didn't know each other. And they all came back with, we think you should publish this book, like you should. So I went forward with it. It's a weird thing because it didn't start out as a book. It started out just as a healing process. And then I kind of heard in my, heart, in my head, well, this isn't for you. You're done with this. This isn't for you. So I feel like it's a big philanthropic project. So yeah, that's how I kind of look at it. And so I think if I decide to write a second book, I'll have a different experience, and I'll probably go through, I don't know. It was healing for me, not grueling. But the part that was hard was when I could finally, there are a couple of chapters that are really rough in the book to write and to go through. And when I could be honest about them and completely peaceful at the same time, I was like, this is good.
That's awesome. Very cool. What are if there was like a couple takeaways or a couple learnings that other leaders in our space you would want them to get from your book and they could hear this interview? What's like, 1 to 3 things that you would really want other leaders in the RIA space to take away from the book?
Kind of alluded to it earlier, but find people that you really admire, ask them a lot of questions about how they got to where they're at. And I think, constantly learning and putting great people around you. Really, I think in our industry, maybe more than others, it's an industry where there are so many succession issues where the founder is, the average age, I think, is, 60 or in their 60s, and they don't have a next-gen team. You really have to solve for this, and it takes years of investing in people to be able to, I referenced Ron, my husband's dad. I was out of the business for, this is generous to me, 2.5 years. And I came back and I realized this business runs without me. It ran just fine without me.
Wow.
I have a very small subset of things I'm good at, as I alluded to earlier. And, were those things as good? I don't know, maybe. I think that mostly this business ran terrific without me, and it's a testament to the people in the business and the culture and the leadership, not me, but the next level leadership of people. We had a wonderful chief operating officer. Her last day is the end of June, so it might be today actually. But she stayed on with us for the last few months and mentored our new chief operating officer. So, we just have a great culture of people so I think you have to figure out how to build that. And you have to also, to some of the themes in the book, look in the dark corner, look at your weaknesses, and be very intentional about solving for those. Because what I've learned is that at any second, things can change. I've also learned to live in the present much more than I ever have, but at any moment, things can change. You have to kind of stress test your business the same way you'd stress test a portfolio. What would happen if a key person was out of the business? What would happen if, your head of operations or your whatever it is, stress test for the things that really worry you, an advisor that you really rely on leaves, what happens, whatever it is. I think you have to stress test your business like you would stress test a portfolio and then solve around it.
Let's talk about technology a little bit, because you said earlier, one of the reasons you went independent is you had the foresight of, hey, if I had an integrated stack of technology, things like that. How much did that contribute to your business being a place that could run without you?
I'm going to this gets to one of my real weaknesses, but I am going to say I'm not the best person to answer that specifically, but I would say that we have state-of-the-art technology, whether we're talking about use of Salesforce and integrating, all of our stuff, e-money, Tamarack compliance, all of that stuff. It's going to be more integrated in the next several years for all of us. And I think that's a big challenge because as much as we've come a long way, we all have to figure out how to integrate all this stuff. But certainly we rely on it a lot, and we have people who are really adept, kind of use it so that I can pick up in the middle of something. So if I'm out of a client meeting for the last 3 meetings, I can go into our CRM system. I can understand what happened. I can see what conversations were. That's super important. So being able to make all that more and more productive, I think is going to be kind of the wave of the future. And I think our people here are really great. Every single person has very good soft skills with clients, and you'd like to see them elevated out of, preparing documents, as we do a lot of, for lack of a better term, alternative investments and one-off deals. And, at some point, a lot of that's going to be automated, and, the use of all of the technology, including AI, is going to help us a lot to get those people to their higher and better place. So I think that that's the future, but it did really, of course, aid us in everything. It's helped us navigate a lot of things. And as a matter of fact, our chief operating officer has a technology background. Our new chief operating officer was a CTO. So that's helpful. And that sounds weird, but he has experience in trading, technology, I'm not going to get it all right, but client relations, like all of these different things that have to talk with each other. And he has great soft skills. So I was really excited to see him come on board when Kim, our previous COO, decided that, she wanted to go on to another chapter, not another job necessarily, but just another chapter, and had been with us a long time. And his skill set seemed to make sense for where the firm is headed. So I think that's another thing that your early question about advice.
Yeah.
Look at your leadership underneath you. Like you should have next gen leaders and people who are diverse and people who have different skill sets that are complementary. I feel really fortunate that I think we have that. So
it's very cool. So you talked a little bit about the future there. And one of the things I love to ask people is to get out their crystal ball and look years into the future about our space, about, advice as a whole, and just kind of take a prediction. Nobody's going to hold you to it. But Lori, if you were to get out your crystal ball and think what's going to happen in the future of the RIA industry, what would you say?
Well, you don't have to get it out too far or polish it too much to know that there's a lot of consolidation going on, and there's, as I referenced earlier, not a great number of people who have good succession plans. So I think there'll be more consolidation. I think the wirehouses are looking at how to get into the RIA space, which is super interesting to me. These are just kind of obvious things, but the use of technology to replace all the rote stuff, it's already happening. It's a foregone conclusion. So if you are looking to get in this industry, you do want to probably embrace some of the things we talked about, like, continual learning and refining your skill set and really knowing who the client is that you serve, because our kind of client base is never going to be served by technology alone. It's never going to happen. And so I think understanding the client base, playing up, so to speak, and looking out into the future, a lot of what the average RIA does will be replaced by technology. So you have to be a firm that people look at and say, they're different, they're what I want, they can solve my problems, because everything looks a lot alike on the surface. So I think it's going to be, discrimination is going to be key, and a lot of things are going to just consolidate because of the lack of succession planning and the obvious average age of the founder. So
what do you think contributes? A lot of people talk about the lack of succession planning. I've never asked anybody this, but I don't know. It's just, I hear it a lot. Why do you think people don't have it? Do they just not want to think about the future? Do you think that, they think they have time? I mean, why? Because it's rampant. There's so few succession plans in the industry.
I think it's all of those things. I was taught to not think in a box. So I don't think in gender. I try to understand, well, why are there still not more women though in this industry? I've been talking about it for years. It's still, why? And I do think that people don't want to focus on the inevitable. It's just like clients, you have to sometimes, look at what's going to happen if you are not here tomorrow. What's going to happen to your family? Even the succession planning stuff goes way beyond present circumstances here and the team, which is super important. But what about your family? What's going to happen if you die?
Yeah.
Or you are not mentally capable of doing this kind of job. What happens to the people who rely on you? So I don't know the answer to it, because I know that forever I've had a succession plan. It hasn't been perfect, by the way, but it's been refined over time. And I've learned, okay, I could tell you right now, here's what I think our weaknesses are in the firm. And we have to, in our strategic planning and our business planning sessions, which are coming up, we have to really focus on those and be intentional. And I think a lot of people just aren't. And maybe it's fear. Maybe it's they just don't want to give up control. I don't know. I could conjecture, but I just know the statistic.
Yeah, it is. It seems like an interesting thing. Everybody talks about all the M&A and everything that's happening is a lot because people don't, and they're like, I guess my succession plan is just selling this thing, right?
Well, yeah, I think a lot of the deals that are going on are because also not just lack of succession planning, but poor planning. And maybe what you said earlier, which is, when you do fail at something, going at it again and fixing it instead of pretending it's, wasn't a problem. So there's a lot of failed partnerships, people that kind of merge together because it gives them bigger AUM, but they haven't thought about what their principles are and their values. And so they have infighting going on, and the way to solve it is to sell it. There's a lot of things, I think it comes down to really good business planning and strategic planning. And, for me, it's pretty freeing to think that this business could exist without me.
Yeah.
And I can choose my spots. I can talk with you this afternoon.
Yeah.
It's really freeing to not feel like to trust these people, that are really wonderful and great to the clients. And I don't have to micromanage anything. And I think that's another aspect of maybe a lot of our personalities as founders. You have to get to the point where people aren't going to do it the way you did, but they may even do it better. And if you can find, I can't dig up the expression now, but I am a perfectionist, but trying to solve for perfect is very imperfect. So
yeah, well stated. All right, we are going to move to the final segment of our show. We call this the Milemarker Minute. It is so it's a series of lightning round questions. The goal is to try and answer all of the questions in a minute or less.
Okay, I have to have some coffee.
Yeah, go ahead. Take some coffee, fuel up. Most of them are lighthearted and fun.
Okay.
Lori, are you ready for the Milemarker Minute?
I'm ready. I'm
Okay.
ready.
My first question for you is, if you could travel anywhere in the world that you haven't been to, where would you go?
Oh, haven't been to Indonesia.
Indonesia. Oh, that's a good one. That's awesome. So you grew up with an Italian grandpa that you talked about before a lot. Do you have lots of memories that everybody talks about of like in the kitchen with the Italian grandma and grandpa making pasta, doing all of that sort of stuff? What's your favorite memory of that growing up that you can remember?
Sitting at a dinner table with my grandfather's friend, who was a surgeon, making veal scallopini in a skillet in front of us, in an electric skillet.
I got to ask you about that more later, because that sounds fantastic. You wrote a book, but going beyond that, what is the best book that you have read in the past 12 months?
Well, I reread it a lot, and I reference it, The Art of War.
Sun Tzu. That's a good one. All right, fantastic. And then Do you think Taylor Swift is good or bad for America right now?
Mostly good because she makes people happy.
Very good. And then I don't know, this question I've really enjoyed lately, but true or false that there will be a $1 trillion RIA within the next 5 years?
Oh my gosh. False.
False. All right. That's good. Laura, you did it. You made it through the Milemarker
I
Minute.
made it.
Congratulations.
Wow. I didn't even need more coffee. That was good.
Thank you so much for coming on the show, sharing insights about what it takes to grow an RIA, about succession planning in this space, telling us about your background, your book, and what it has taken for you to build such a wonderful firm. I really enjoyed the conversation, and I think there was some tremendous insights today. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. I really enjoyed it too. It was great.
Good.
Thank you.
We'll have to have you back on, and we'll talk more again. But until next time, everybody, please make sure that you click follow or subscribe wherever you're listening to this. We'll link up to all of the ways you can connect with Lori in the show notes if you want to reach out, talk to her, if you want to buy the book. And in the meantime, we will see you on the next episode.